A very warm welcome everyone. Today in this class, we will be studying Unit 14, Atomic Structure and Chemical Bond, Class 9 under the subject Science and Technology. I hope you all are prepared with all the materials you need for class, your notebooks and pens. So without further ado, let's get started. Now let us start with structure of an atom. So atom consists of a nucleus in the center, which consists of protons and neutrons, which is represented by pink and green color here. And electrons, they revolve around the nucleus in an orbit. So this is the basic structure of atom. So duplet. Duplet is the tendency of an element to hold a maximum of 2 electrons in its outermost orbit. So if an atom has single orbit, then it has the tendency to hold maximum 2 electron in its outermost orbit. For example, we can see here helium atom has 2 electron in its outermost orbit. So helium atom is in duplet state. Since it already possesses 2 electron in its outermost orbit, it is stable. Hence it does not readily participate in any chemical reaction. That's why it is also called a noble gas. Now let us take another example of hydrogen. So hydrogen has single atom in its outermost orbit. So to reach a duplet state, it needs additional single electron in its outermost orbit. So what it does is, another hydrogen atom also has the same thing. It has only 1 electron in its outermost orbit. So the two hydrogen atom, they share its outermost electron with each other. And after sharing this electron, they both possess 2 electrons in its outermost orbit, and hence it reaches a stable duplet state. Similarly, octet. Octet is the tendency of an electron to hold maximum 8 electrons in its outermost orbit. So here you can see the example of neon. You can see that the outermost orbit of neon possesses 8 electrons. So neon is in octet state. So it is a stable state and it does not readily take part in the chemical reaction. Not only neon, other elements such as argon, krypton, xenon and radon, they all possess 8 electrons in its outermost orbit. Hence it does not take part in the chemical reaction. That's why these elements are also known as noble gases. Now let us take another example of fluorine. Fluorine has 7 atoms in its outermost orbit, as you can see here. So what fluorine does is, it needs 1 more electron to reach the octet state. So what it does is, it combines, that is, it shares the 1 single electron that is present in its outermost orbit with another fluorine atom. And when they both share their single electron of their outermost orbit, then they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 number of atoms in its outermost orbit. So these both fluorine atoms reach the octet state. Now let us take another example to clear this concept about octet and duplet. So lithium. Lithium has single electron in its outermost orbit and fluorine has 7 electrons in its outermost orbit. So this is the structure of fluorine and lithium. So what it does is, lithium to reach duplet state, it needs to give this electron out. And for fluorine to reach the stable octet state, it should gain 1 electron in its outermost orbit. So this lithium atom, it donates 1 electron to the fluorine atom. So what happens? The fluorine now has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 electrons in its outermost orbit. Hence it reaches an octet state, while lithium has 2 electrons. Now this inner shell is the outermost shell of lithium and it possesses 2 electrons. So lithium reaches the stable duplet state. So lithium donates 1 electron, becoming electropositive, and fluorine, it receives 1 electron from lithium, becoming electronegative. Now let us understand what a chemical bond is. So chemical bond is a force with which the atoms of an element, they combine to form a chemical bond. So it is the force between the atoms of the element that is present in a molecule and the force that keeps them in a molecular form, keeps the element to form in a molecular form, is the chemical bond. So let us try to understand this chemical bond with some examples that we can see in our daily life, like salt. So salt is sodium chloride. So sodium chloride means it has sodium and chlorine atom. So the element sodium possesses 1 electron in its outermost orbit, and the element of chlorine's single atom possesses 7 electron in its outermost orbit. So for sodium to reach the duplet state, it should donate 1 electron, and for chlorine to reach the octet state, it should receive 1 electron. So this sodium atom, it donates 1 electron to the chlorine atom so that both of them reach the octet state. So sodium, it gives 1 electron, so it becomes electropositive, and chlorine, it receives 1 electron, so it becomes electronegative. And this is how they form one molecule of sodium chloride. Now this type of bond in which one of the atom of an element, it gives or donates the electron and the other one receives the electron, is known as electrovalent bond or ionic bond. So let us define this. So electrovalent bond is the bond that is formed by the transfer of one or more than one electron from one atom to the another atom, is called an electrovalent bond. And for examples that we just studied, sodium, when it combines with chlorine, sodium donates 1 electron to chlorine to form sodium chloride, and the bond between sodium and chlorine is known as electrovalent bond. Now, the number of electron which an atom of an element it loses or it gains to form this electrovalent bond is called electrovalency. So electrovalency means the number of electron which either an atom loses or the other atom gains. That number of electron is known as its electrovalency. And the compound that is formed by the transfer of electron from one atom of an element to the another atom of an element is known as ionic compound or electrovalent compound. So the compound that possesses electrovalent bond or ionic bond between them is the ionic compound or electrovalent compound. So for example, we already studied about sodium chloride. Similarly, in magnesium chloride, magnesium donates its 2 electron in its outermost orbit to 2 different chlorine atoms to form an electrovalent compound. Similarly, copper also donates its electron to the sulfate to form an electrovalent compound. So these are a few examples of electrovalent compound. Now normally, you should remember this point, that normally a metal combines with another non-metal to form a covalent compound. So this is an important point you must remember, that is, a metal combines with a non-metal to form a covalent compound. Now we just studied about sodium chloride, and the type of chemical bond they form is electrovalent bond. Now let us take another example that we use in our daily life, that is water. So we all know that the molecular formula of water is H2O. So it consists of 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen. Now let us see what type of chemical bond it forms. So oxygen has 6 number of electron in its outermost orbit, while hydrogen has single electron in its outermost orbit. So for the hydrogen to reach the duplet state, what it does is it shares the electron that is present in its outermost orbit with 1 valence electron that is present in the outermost orbit of oxygen. Now the hydrogen atom, it reaches the duplet state, but oxygen just has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 electron in its outermost state. It has not reached the octet state yet. So another hydrogen atom again shares its outermost electron with the oxygen atom, and now this hydrogen atom also reaches the duplet state and the oxygen atom also reaches the octet state. Hence, this is how a water molecule is formed. And now in this type of bond, what happens is there is no transfer of electron, but there is sharing of electron. That is sharing of electron that is present in its outermost orbit. And the type of bond that is formed by sharing of electron in the outermost orbit of the atom of an element is known as covalent bond. So, we will study in detail about covalent bond in today's class. So, let us define covalent bond. So, covalent bond is a bond that is formed by sharing one or more electron between two or more than two atoms. Then that type of bond is called as a covalent bond. For example, we just studied in water molecule that each hydrogen atom shares one electron present in its outermost orbit with electrons that is present in the outermost orbit of oxygen, in which the hydrogen reaches the two-plate state and oxygen reaches the octet state. And in this way, they form a bond by sharing of electron. And this type of bond is known as covalent bond. Now, covalent bond is represented by a straight line between the atoms. For example, here in boron trichloride, you can see that boron shares a single electron with each chlorine atom. So, the covalent bond is represented by a straight line between the atoms which are involved in sharing of electron. And the another thing is the non-metals, they can either share one pair of electrons like in hydrogen molecule, or they can even share two pairs of electron like in oxygen molecule, or they can also share three pairs of electron like in nitrogen molecule to form a covalent bond. Now let us take a few examples of covalent molecules and compounds. So molecules of elements, that is oxygen O2 and Cl2, and molecule of compound, that is ammonia, hydrochloric acid, etc. Now looking at this, what do you think is the difference between molecule of an element and molecule of a compound? Yes, you're right. It is in molecule of element, the same elements combines to form a molecule of element, while in molecules of compound, different elements they combine to form the molecule of compounds. Here you can see this is a molecule of element oxygen. You can see that two oxygen atoms, they are forming two covalent bond between them, that is they share two pairs of electron with each other. So this is also a molecule of element oxygen. Similarly, this is another example, that is molecule of element of nitrogen. Here single nitrogen shares three pairs of electron with another atom of nitrogen to form the molecule of element nitrogen. In here you can see this is a molecule of compound because two different types of element is present here to form this compound, and this compound is CH4. So what is this? Yes, it's methane. So each carbon atom, it shares electron with hydrogen atom forming single covalent bond between them. So this is molecule of the compound methane. Similarly, this is NH3. This is ammonia, and in here you can see two different elements, that is nitrogen and hydrogens. Nitrogen shares electrons with each hydrogen forming a single covalent bond between each hydrogen. So this is a molecule of compound ammonia. Yes. Now let us study how a covalent compound is formed. So let us take an example of oxygen molecule. Now an oxygen atom has 8 number of protons, 8 number of neutrons, and it also has 8 numbers of electrons. So now the first shell, it occupies maximum 2 electrons. Now how many electron remains? Yes, 6 electrons. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now similarly, there is another oxygen atom. this also possesses maximum 2 electron in its innermost shell, then remaining 6 electron in its outermost shell. Now, for this oxygen atom to reach the octet state, it needs additional 2 electrons. And similarly, for this oxygen atom also, it needs 2 more electrons to reach the stable octet state. So what it does is, this both atoms of oxygen shares 2 pairs of electrons with each other to reach the stable octet state. So how it happens is, it gives 2 electrons, and this atom also, it shares 2 electrons with this oxygen atom. So now you can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This oxygen atom also has 8 number of electrons in its outermost orbit, and this oxygen atom also has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 number of electrons in its outermost orbit. So they form an oxygen molecule, and while forming the oxygen molecule, they share 2 pairs of electrons with each other. So a covalent bond is represented by 2 straight lines between the atoms, and this is the representation of the covalent bond between the 2 oxygen atoms that forms an oxygen molecule. This is why an oxygen molecule is a covalent compound. We just studied the process of formation of oxygen molecule, that is a type of covalent compound. So how did it happen? Let us revise again. Oxygen has 6 number of electrons in its outermost orbit, and another oxygen atom also has 6 numbers of electrons in its outermost orbit. So they both share 2 electrons among each other. Hence, they form a stable octet state, because here you can see each atom has 8 electrons in its outermost orbit. Now, since they share 2 pairs of electrons with each other, they form a double covalent bond between the 2 atoms of oxygen. So, oxygen molecule is also a covalent compound. Now, let us study another example of a covalent compound and see how this forms. So, hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid has the molecular formula of HCl. So, it consists of hydrogen atom and chlorine atom. So, hydrogen atom contains single electron in its outermost orbit, and since chlorine has total number of 17 electrons, it contains 7 electrons in its outermost orbit. So what happens is, hydrogen needs 1 more electron to reach the duplet state, while chlorine also needs 1 electron in its outermost shell to reach the octet state. So the hydrogen atom and chlorine atom shares single electron in its outermost orbit to form 1 molecule of hydrochloric acid. As you can see here, hydrogen reaches the duplet state by sharing single electron in its outermost orbit with chlorine atom, and chlorine also reaches octet state in its outermost orbit by sharing 1 electron from its valence shell. So this is how a covalent compound hydrochloric acid forms. Now since they share single pair of electron between each other, so it is represented by 1 single line, that is single covalent bond. Now let us take another example, that is ammonia. Ammonia has a molecular formula of NH3. So it contains 3 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atoms of nitrogen. Now hydrogen atom has 1 electron in its outermost orbit, while nitrogen has 5 electrons in its outermost orbit. So each hydrogen atom needs 1 electron each to reach the duplet state, whereas the nitrogen atom needs 3 more electrons in its outermost orbit to reach the stable octet state. So what they do is they share electron in its outermost orbit. So each hydrogen atom shares single electron with the nitrogen atom to form duplet state, and similarly nitrogen also shares 3 electrons with each of the 3 hydrogen atom to reach the octet state. So since nitrogen and hydrogen shares 1 electron each, so 1 pair of electron between them with each atom of hydrogen, so it is represented by single line between each of the atom. That's why nitrogen and hydrogen has single covalent bond between them to form ammonia and H3 molecule. Now let us take another example, that is methane. Now methane has the molecular formula of CH4. So it has 4 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of carbon. So each hydrogen atom has only 1 electron in its outermost orbit. So it needs additional 1 electron in its outermost orbit to reach the duplet state. Whereas carbon has 4 electron in its outermost orbit. So it needs additional 4 electron to reach the stable octet state. So each atom of hydrogen shares its outermost electron with each electron that is present in the outermost shell of carbon atom to form methane. So here you can see each hydrogen atom has reached duplet state and the carbon has also reached the octet state. Now in this way, since each hydrogen atom shares 1 single pair of electron with carbon, so it is represented by single straight line between each element. Hence, it is single covalent bond between each of the atom. So this is how a covalent compound methane is formed. Now let us study a few characteristics of covalent bond. Now the first characteristic is covalent compounds are usually made by combining 2 or more nonmetals. So covalent compound is formed by the combination, that is sharing of electron between the 2 or more than 2 nonmetals. So nonmetals are usually found on the right hand side of the periodic table. Another characteristic is covalent compounds have low melting and boiling point. But why does the covalent compound has low melting and boiling point even though the bond between the 2 atoms is strong? It is because even though the covalent bond are very strong, the intermolecular force, that is Cl and Cl over here, has a covalent bond between them. But this covalent molecule and this covalent molecule is held together by an intermolecular force, and this intermolecular force is weak. So due to this weak intermolecular force, we do not require high amount of thermal energy to overcome this intermolecular force and separate the molecules. So since even though the covalent bond between the 2 chlorine atom is strong, the intermolecular force between two different covalent molecule is weak. So we do not require high amount of external energy to overcome that intermolecular force. That's why the covalent compound has low melting and boiling point, because even if we apply a little amount of thermal energy, it can easily dissociate. That's why covalent compound has low melting and boiling point. For example, when we light a candle, the candle wax melts easily because the candle wax is a covalent compound. So due to the heat energy from the flame, the intermolecular force easily dissociates. Hence, the wax melts. Another example of a covalent compound is methane, which is present in high quantity in gobar gas, that is a bar gas. And what happens due to the weak intermolecular force between the molecules or covalent molecules, the methane gas burns very easily and vigorously. Now another characteristics of covalent bond is most of the covalent bond are insoluble in water. We have studied in previous class that electrovalent compound are usually soluble in water, such as salt. When we pour some salt in water and stir it, does it dissolve or not? Yes, it does, because it is an electrovalent compound. That's why it is soluble in water. But the covalent compound like ghee and oil, if you take a spoonful of ghee and oil and pour it in a water and try to stir it, does it dissolve? No, it does not, because these are covalent compound and they are insoluble in water. But here we have written most of the covalent compounds, not all of the covalent compounds, because there are few exceptions of covalent compound that are soluble in water, like sugar. Sugar is a covalent compound, and when we pour some sugar and try to stir it, it easily gets dissolved in water. So that's why we cannot say that all the covalent compounds are insoluble in water. So we have to say that most of the covalent compounds are insoluble in water. And the last characteristics of covalent bond we'll discuss is that covalent compound do not conduct electricity like electrovalent compound. Why? Because electrovalent compounds does not form an electropositive and electronegative ion, because these charged particles are required for the electrical conduction. But what in the covalent bond fixes the electron, and since the electron they cannot move, the electricity cannot be conducted. That's why covalent compounds does not conduct electricity. Now we have already completed this chapter. Now let us try to test ourselves and our knowledge that we just gained by trying to answer a few questions. So let us solve this. A covalent bond forms between two elements by donating electron, gaining electron, sharing electron, or gaining and sharing electron. So which is the correct answer? Yes, it's option C, because a covalent bond is a bond that is formed by sharing of electron between the two elements, that is sharing of outermost electron between the two elements. That is how a covalent bond is formed. Now let us answer another question. A covalent bond forms between two elements if both of them are metal, both of them are non-metal, one of them is metal and one of them is non-metal, or both of them have equal valency. So which is correct? Yes, option B is correct, because I mentioned it in the properties of covalent compound that a covalent bond is usually formed between two non-metals. Now let us answer another question. So we have statements and two arguments, the statement and two arguments. And these are all the options among which one of them is correct. So let us read the statements and arguments. Statement. In the formation of water molecule, an oxygen atom forms two ionic bonds with two hydrogen atoms. Is this true? No, it's not true, because while forming water molecule, you can see that hydrogen and oxygen, they shares the electron. They do not shares the electron and form a covalent bond. They do not transfer the electron to form an ionic bond. So the statement is incorrect, because in the formation of water molecule, an oxygen atom forms covalent bond with two hydrogen atom. Now argument 1. Both the hydrogen and oxygen atom attains octet state. Is this true? No, it's incorrect. Why? Because you can see over here that hydrogen attains duplet state. Only the oxygen atom attains the octet state. Since this argument 1 is not entirely correct, so we should say that it is incorrect. Now the final argument. Oxygen atom attains octet state and hydrogen attain duplet share state by sharing electron. Is this true? Yes, it is true, because you can see here that the oxygen atom attains the octet state and the hydrogen atom attains the duplet state. How? By sharing the outermost electron present in its outermost orbit. So option 3 is correct, that is only the argument 2 is correct. So I'll give you a project work now that you must do. So what you should do is, you should take a chart paper and you should draw the covalent bond of all of these covalent molecules and covalent compounds I've mentioned. So oxygen, nitrogen, chlorine, methane, sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide. And after you draw it in the chart paper, I'll show you how to draw it. So you should draw all the covalent bond of all of the 6 in a chart paper. I've already shown you the example of 2, that is oxygen and methane. Now similarly you have to draw nitrogen, chlorine, sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide, its covalent bond, how it is formed in a chart paper. And after you made this chart paper, you should show it to your science teacher and make sure you paste it in the wall of your classroom. So in this class, we studied in detail about covalent bond and its properties. And I also gave you a project work. Make sure you do it, and I'll see you guys in the next class.